Shame is not merely an emotion. It can be so deeply and developmentally rooted, it becomes the basis from which you operate. Shame is sneaky, and it lies. It hides in perfectionism, people-pleasing, overfunctioning, and that tiny voice that tells you you are never enough. If you're tired of shame running the show, join me for a deep dive workshop where we learn what shame actually is, how it operates in the mind and body, and most importantly, how to loosen its grip and call it out for the liar that it is. This workshop is practical, empowering, and trauma-informed. Real tools to reclaim your worth and rewrite your self-talk. If you're ready to step into a healthier story, sign up at theedifygroup.com. This is Hungry for Healing. Real people, real pain, real peace. I'm Becky, by the way, Wengreen, a marriage and family therapist, sharing stories that nourish, edify, and heal, reminding us that even in heavy darkness, we can expect light to come. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hungry for Healing. Today, I am with Spencer Cooper, and we met in the most organic way, and I have to tell you how, because I think it was so much fun. One night, my husband and I chatting on the phone about who's going to do what for dinner, and what are we going to do for dinner? And he says to me, let's just go get some soup, because we had recently discovered this great little place in Springville.
Nothing better for the soul than soup.
That served soup. And I have this love of Victorian homes, old homes, because I was raised in one on the avenues in Salt Lake City.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so I constantly watch the homes in Springville and see what they're doing. And this change came about for that little home, and they made it into this soup and gelato place.
The original 1884 home.
So cool. So that caught my eye. So anyway, we had tried it a couple of times. And so he said, well, let's go get soup. So I'm like, I'm all for that. So we went to this place and I walked in, been there before, and I noticed a new bookshelf. And I was looking at the books and I was like, that's a very interesting collection of books, because I have that one and I have this one and I have this one and I have this one.
All your books.
All my books. And I'm like, who is buying these books? And then Spencer came out and I asked him about
the books.
Why do you have these books?
They're my favorite books.
And then that's how we met.
Yeah.
And then we had this amazing conversation. And then I decided I needed to invite Spencer on my podcast. So here we are.
I'm very grateful. And I agree with you. That did not seem like a chance encounter.
Totally. And I told my husband after, I said, you were inspired.
Oh, that's awesome.
You were inspired to go get soup.
Well, I'm glad you love the house and the old historicity as much as we did.
Yeah. And the great soup and gelato. So, okay. So Spencer is going to share with us some experiences, and I am going to just turn it over to him and he's just going to take it.
Oh, man. Well, first of all, thanks again for this invitation. I've done a few podcasts before, but anytime I get a chance to speak about spirituality and mental health, I mean, that's been the crux of my career. I've been a chaplain for the last 20 years and with the Air Force, with the state mental hospital, as well as some other organizations that, you know, on the side here or there I've helped with. And over the years, as you know, if you have a practice, you eventually kind of gather people who are like, oh, my brother's friend, my uncle's cousin, you know, and they may not fall under your jurisdiction as far as like what you do full time at a facility or a government institution or a military base, but you try and find ways to help. And I've just sort of done that over my career. And when my wife and I were looking at that end of the road, kind of retiring this year, what else did we want to do and love to do? We both said there's nothing like serving the needs of people spiritually, but what served our needs all of those years while we were going around, you know, the world helping in that way for other people was soup and food and delicious things that we could eat. So our relationship with really good food kind of prompted this idea that we could create a space that is actually spiritual in nature and thus invites everyone from all different walks of life and backgrounds and believers and non-believers alike to come into a space, feel safe, and be healed by really good food.
I love it. And beautiful quotes on the walls and art. And Music.
Yeah. Believing that if we had all of those things for the senses all together in one space, that people could actually come in and be healed. And I'm telling you, this is not what this podcast is about, but if we had time, we've had so many already come in and say, this place is healing and this place just makes me want to come back every day. And then there are people who do come back almost every day. So it's been a fulfillment of our dreams. We've only been open like 9 months, the Ragamuffin Soup House and Bakery, but it's just been awesome. And we hope it brings more of the community together and out of their houses and off their phones, disconnecting from the artificial intelligence around us and connecting with the human intelligence. So that's kind of why we did that.
I love it.
Yeah, my career, for those who may not know what chaplaincy is, because I didn't when I started, I didn't know. As a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I didn't know that my faith had chaplains. But I was checking out of a military base after my first 4 years active duty as a Marine in San Diego. And as I was checking out of the base, little did I know, but the chaplain's office that you have to go to check out with a lot of other places recognized my area code on my phone first and then asked what I was going to go study. And I told him how kind of I've been through some really rough stuff with people's families over the years that I was in the Marine Corps, and my wife and I had found fulfillment in trying to help them best we could. So I had decided that before the Marine Corps, I was going to be a musician. That was it. There's nothing else I was going to do. After the Marine Corps and those experiences, I realized helping families was probably the most important thing that could be done. And you could use music as a tool in that, but unless it was towards that end, I'm not sure what the point was, right, of music if it's not to help and heal people. So I decided to go and study marriage, family, human development at BYU, and I told him I was going to go do that. And he just kind of smiled like you are right now. And he was just like, what a great thing. Wow. But he was very interested in that, and I didn't know why. But as I got back to BYU and got a phone call from the church's what's called Specialized Ministries Division, now it's called that. Back then it was called military relations. I thought it was kind of strange they knew I came back to school and was doing all that. But apparently when that chaplain who checked me out of base retired the very next month, that was the end of, like, he was in the very last month of his career. He had told them there was this young man who wanted to help families and was getting out of the Marine Corps and going back to BYU to study family life. And that's an odd combination, of course. And so it perked their interest because that's kind of the basis education they would dream of for having someone who goes back into the military as a chaplain. And so they called me and said asked if I had any interest in doing that. And I told them, my very words were, I'm Mormon, right? I thought you had to be a Catholic priest or a Protestant minister. I'd met chaplains in the Marine Corps, but I never a Latter-day Saint one. So they said, yeah, that's why we're calling, because we have this new program at BYU to get a master's degree in chaplaincy. Wondering if you'd be interested. And it just kind of came together after that, kind of fit. To be honest, I was a little resistant because I didn't want to go back in the military. I was so ready to be done for all the reasons we'll talk about here on this, because of the stuff that in myself had been damaged while I was in the military, morally, spiritually, and otherwise. Long story short, my wife and I both finally consented and agreed to give that a look. And when we did, we had our prayers fully answered that was the right path for us, and decided to jump back into the military. So I spent 2 years in the Navy as a reserve chaplain, and then I've been the last 12 years in the Air Force as a chaplain, the Air National Guard here in Utah. So it's been an incredible journey, and it is a journey of healing. It's kind of amazing when you talk about healing that the very things that we sometimes avoid, that God will gently and then sometimes even forcefully give us a chance to recognize are the things that usually end up giving us the opportunity. I know that my career has helped so many people, but no one more than me, right? And it's just always amazing to me how God does that, because, it is only through helping other people that we heal. It's only in relationships that healing can even happen. People who believe they can heal, on their own. I've heard so many people say, like, take some time to go heal on my own. I'm like, okay, you can feel good on your own, but until and if you're in a relationship of healing, but with anything, right? I mean, you can be in a relationship with a tree or with grass or with good food at my shop, because all of those things are energy exchanges. And as you're exchanging energy with living, beautiful, nutrient-rich beings, then you receive what you need to heal. But healing on your own, as if to say, if you isolate yourself for a while or avoid the thing that you need to confront, and that would bring you healing, it's more just delaying healing, which is okay. Because if you don't feel like you have what it takes to confront something then
Right.
perhaps a pause is healthy or normal.
Yeah, you got to be ready and open.
Exactly. It's at least natural to want to do that. And I sure did. You know, always the old cliche that people go into mental health stuff because they are the ones who need mental health healing. I don't think that's as untrue as we like to think it is, but it's also not true at the same time. It's that the people who've been giving those very unique and special experiences to be so wounded are the best ones to help heal others, because they themselves, in a way, are going through that process with them, in relationship with them. And I know that was the case for me. I wanted to help families because I had watched so many close to me and my wife and I, frankly, personally, go through such hard things in the Marine Corps that I knew that was a need in the world. It woke me up completely from just my happy little musician life that I had before the Marine Corps. That was solely focused on what brought me pleasure, right? To seeing the needs of others deeply because of how hard what my wife and I went through was. And then I think that made me a better chaplain. So I'm not one who's afraid to admit that I jumped back into a field that I knew I needed healing in. And I think that's made all the difference. I would never say that that was a bad thing. I would say that that's what made me a good chaplain. So
excellent.
Yeah. So my personal story of healing is what I'm here to talk about. You know, to be alive is trauma, they say, to live. But I would also say to be alive is also, you're on some point of the pathway of healing, because to be alive is also to learn how to heal. If being alive is trauma, then it's also the opportunity to learn how to heal from that trauma. And so where my healing really started, there's nothing so traumatic to the human mind, they say, is a great and sudden change, right? So when I got back from my mission in Brazil, 9/11 had just happened the year prior. And I could not tell you how different the country was that I came back to as opposed to left. And, you know, on your mission, you're just kind of focused. You don't watch TV. You don't get radio broadcasts or anything. So I knew 9/11 had happened, but I didn't exactly know how traumatic that was for the country. And I wasn't up to speed at all on the details of it. And so when I got home and I full breadth of that, you know, every song on the radio was about it, and everything everyone talked about still was about that. And watching our country go into Afghanistan and then Iraq, that first year when I was home, it was a great and sudden change, but it was something I realized, like, maybe there's something more to life than just what I want to do. Maybe issues like this, you know, is a way I can do something bigger than myself. And so, which you kind of fall in love with doing on your mission, like serving others' needs instead of your own all the time. And I just wanted that to continue. So long story short, I went to my dad first and said, do you want, you know, how do you join the military? I don't come from a long line of military tradition in my family. I was the first really in a few generations. And so he said, well, I know there's those little strip malls that say Marine Corps or Army. I'm sure if you walk into one of those.
Not a hard thing.
Yeah. So I did. I walked in, just said, I want to serve. And I believe I said I want to be a soldier. And the guy corrected me on the spot and said, you mean a Marine? And then I'm like, okay, sure. Like, I didn't know the difference. I couldn't have told you really the difference between the Marine Corps and the Army. I was very naive. But he said, well, what do you want to do? And I was kind of like, serve my country. I didn't know you had to pick a job. So he opened this big binder and he said, no, there's all these jobs. Like, what do you do now? What are you studying? Are you going to school? And I said, yeah, I'm going to school to study music. And he's like, oh, I just had a guy come in here from the West Coast Marine Band recruiting guy. He's the only guy who can like take an audition and have you come in as a musician. And I was floored because I was like, oh my gosh, this is better than I even dreamed. Because if I can just play music, you know, to serve my country, I didn't even know that.
And what do you play?
The French horn.
Okay.
And piano, but primarily as a performance. I was majoring in French horn performance at the time in college. So I was like, this is my dream. I didn't even know I could do that. So I took this audition. The guy said, yeah, it's great. You'll go to the Armed Forces School of Music for at least 6 months. And depending on how you do there, you know, if you graduate, you can go out and play in the big wide world at all these cool national events and parades and halftime shows. And it was just a dream job, right? Wow. Sign me up. So I told my dad about it, and his wisdom and years of experience, he said, hey, listen up. I want you to know something. If you sign on that contract, no matter what they tell you or where you might end up, if you're not ready to fight and die for your country, don't do it. Because you're a warm body, you're a number, and if they need you, they'll pull you. And I thought, man, my dad's paranoid. You know, he doesn't want me to do this because I'm like, they promised me up and down this is what I'd be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So but then he said, well, pray about it, really, like, be sure you want to do it. So I did. And I'm so glad he did that because I really took 3 real firm days to really think if my dad's right, and they send me to war.
Yeah. If this is true.
What do I want to do, and would I really want to sacrifice my life in that way for my country? And at the end of the day, I said, yeah, I would. I don't think that's going to happen, but if it did, I'd be okay. And so I told my dad that, and he said, okay, then go and sign whatever contract, you want to. So they signed me up for the band. So then they sent me off to basic training, and it's an arduous, long Marine Corps basic training. First thing that was traumatic, and I'm telling you, the first thing that I know a lot of other people may not even need to heal from, and they may even laugh when they hear this, but like, I was so sheltered growing up here in Utah in my great, loving, united family that I had no idea truly how many people in the Marine Corps would have such a different take on life and morality. The language they use, the things they talk about, the basic training are like your first indoctrination of being desensitized. They want you to adopt this mindset that killing is good, that it makes you strong and manly, and that you're a better Marine for having a thicker skin. Even the way they talk about women and some of the things that are very derogatory is all designed to sort of desensitize you so that when you're out there actually shooting people, you don't kind of lose your mind about it, right? And I just was so unprepared. I understand a lot more now about hypermasculine environments and how some of those things are super unhealthy, but at the time I just had no idea. I was like, what is this? This is not the way I was raised to believe. And so the whole time you almost feel like you're faking it. Like I could never be one of these guys because that would mean I'm a bad person to my family.
Wow.
But to be and fit in here, and I just signed a contract, apparently I have to be like this, or I don't fit in here. I can't be like when I'm back home. And you start to just have this trauma, like, what did I just sign up for? And I'm doing this for 4 years. And like, you feel like I felt like I'd made a huge mistake. That was my experience. Like, what did I do? And if my parents knew I was saying and doing these things, like, oh my gosh, like I would not be acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you try and keep a low profile, but inevitably, I remember there's just a lot of experiences that so basic training was morally injurious to me. I really remembered thinking like, how could a military like so noble and great as America's have such low morality and talk so degradingly about its own people and its citizens? To be a civilian was like an insult to the way they spoke about women and things. It's not the way I was raised.
And you had to go against that authentic value.
Absolutely.
Of yours.
The biggest trauma of all, right?
Yeah.
Not being authentic. That's
Holy
it.
cow.
And so you start to create this sort of like guilt complex or like a two-sided personality.
Yeah.
And I just remember being so glad when I graduated that like, okay, I don't have to do that again. But then they said, well, now you have to go to Marine combat training. I was like, no one told me about Marine combat training. They just said I had to go to basic training. Like, well, you have to.
And how long was basic training? Basic
training is 12 weeks, and then you graduate, and then they send you to 3 more weeks. And if you're going to be like an infantryman, it's 12 more weeks. Thankfully, I was just going into the band, so they're like, you just do your 3 weeks, and you're done. But Marine combat training is like going from like elementary to college. It's like,
wow.
Whoa. Like, and you start to dawn, like when I was there, that's when it hit me. They're making us specialize way too much for me to just go play music. Like there's no way they would waste the time and money to train me to be this assertive at shooting and combat operations if I was just really going to go play in the band. And so I started to really have the first like doubts of, my dad was right, like
this is coming.
What is all this for if I'm just going to go play halftime shows? But then inevitably I graduated finally the infantry school, and they sent me to the Armed Forces School of Music for 6 glorious months of my life. And it was the greatest 6 months of my whole 4 years in the Marine Corps, except that on the very last week when I was graduating, they took me in. The commandant of the school said, good news and bad news, Cooper. Good news is you're going to Miramar, which I had no idea where it was. I thought he meant the country of Myanmar, which I didn't think was good news. But it turns out it's North County, San Diego, and it's an air base there for the Marine Corps. And I was like, okay, that's good news. And then he said, the bad news is your unit has already been attached to a security forces battalion for the 4th LAD division, and you will be going out with them immediately. They're training now in the desert. You'll be joining them and then going out. And I was kind of floored, like, what do you mean by that? Like, why is the band deployed in Iraq? And he said, you won't be taking your French horn, just take your M16. That was it. I spent the rest of my time in the Marine Corps going back and forth out to Iraq. Every year we'd go and then come back, and then 9 months later we'd deploy again and do it again. So I spent like a glorious 6 months of my whole 4 years studying music, maybe another 4 or 5 months performing in things like, there was one time we got to play for Gerald Ford's funeral when he died, so that was my claim to fame. But it was very short-lived, and then we were right back out with security forces. So I was really a musician very briefly and a security force Marine for the vast majority of the time. And that is like perimeter security and vehicle inspections, which are very dangerous.
In Iraq.
In Iraq, yep. And everything from that to detention facilities. And that, to me, that was where I had the most trauma, watching people, mostly young boys, who were trying to make a buck, being recruited by terrorist organizations to plant roadside bombs or do whatever they wanted them to do. And we would detain those kids and men, but they were not the terrorists you think of on TV. They were just being paid by them. They were really just impoverished Iraqis who were trying to get through a very, very hard economic time in their country's history. And the stuff that, I don't know, I went through and saw, it's like that moral injury that started in basic training. It just got worse and worse and worse as I started thinking, like, what are we doing? And why is our country doing this? Why am I the one doing it? Like, and then on the other hand, trying to fit in with security forces and be that perfect Marine that was calloused and didn't care and had foul language, and I don't know, just so many things that wasn't natural to me.
Yeah.
And so, years of that, when I finally had a chance to get out, I was the most excited person to ever be done with my 4-year contract. I was just so ready to get out. I was
4
so
years.
ready. And I just couldn't, I was like, as a kid when you count the days to Christmas and you just can't wait. It was way beyond that. It was like every day was like this 2-year period of time that went by so slow because I was so excited to be done. And I couldn't believe I'd survived it. And I just was ready to go home and do something totally different. But in that period of time, as you're deploying and coming back, you really watch those families, those couples, especially young Marines, come back and their families fall apart. Some of them had one kid or two. Most of them were single, and then a few of them had just gotten married, like myself. And because we're all in that same kind of stage of life and you're out there as Marines together, you come home and suddenly you're seeing the fallout of the effects of all that morality. Like, you can't train someone to be so desensitized to feeling and emotion and then expect them to be good husbands and fathers. This just doesn't work. And yet we do that to every single basically trained Marine and, frankly, soldier and service member. We expect them to be these machines on the one hand and create them into that intentionally, and then say, well, why do you guys have an 85% divorce rate?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, because you made them incompatible to good relationships. You literally grilled that into them, and then you're surprised that they have all these family issues. And, speaking at it now as someone who went and got my master's degree and wrote about it, but like, honestly, at the time, you're just like, what's going on? Why is this happening? And amazingly, because of, I think, our shared faith background, but also just our friendship, that my wife and I had been friends for 7 years. We had dated on and off, both served missions during that time, wrote countless letters. Like, we knew each other ad nauseum. And so when I got married, those deployments for us kind of brought us closer and closer in a strange way. But also, I knew that it was going to be short-lived because, frankly, like, I wasn't being completely authentic, like I told you, myself. And I knew that, like, around her, I could be one version of myself that I grew up being, that she knew. And then when I was in the Marine Corps, though, it was very different. And
you had to flip a switch.
Exactly. And that can only last so long. That's unsustainable, in my opinion. At least it was for me for many years. And so by the end of my 4 years in the Marine Corps, my wife went through a lot in realizing, like, there was a very, very damaged and calloused and angry, like really mad at the system that had expected me to do that to people and be that way. So, credit to her completely. You make your mind up as to whether you want to live with someone who at the end of the day is so mad about that sometimes they don't treat you well. Not because they don't love you, but because they're so, internally conflicted.
Sure.
And so that was me at the end of the 4 years.
Anger.
2 back-to-back 7-month deployments is enough by far, especially in the Marine Corps, when you're out there at the tip of the spear, kind of doing stuff that's dangerous every day, watching other guys get killed and then coming home and watching them all go through that and then going right back out and doing it again. And you decide, I guess it's best to be the machine, because feeling this is way harder, right?
Having to be authentic.
That's right.
In that reality would be unbearable.
Yep. And so, and now back then we had barely even started studying what we now call post-traumatic stress disorder. We didn't know anything about PTSD, really. I guess from that point forward, the reason it was so appealing to me to go and study family life at BYU was truly to try and help my buddies. We can give answers to myself and to them that we didn't have at the time. And I just felt like this need to, maybe I could, if I could learn enough, maybe I could just keep helping them. But then you realize that's going to take years. And one of them took his life during that period, and it just gets darker and darker, And so pretty soon you're caught between this, like, how do I ever go back to being just who I was before that? And you realize there's no such thing.
Yeah.
There's no such thing.
You couldn't.
That's right. You don't go back to being something. You have to adapt into becoming something even more resilient and beautiful and deep and meaningful. Like, I know it's cliche, but the cocoon concept of, maybe I was happy as a caterpillar, but my only choice now is to change into a butterfly. Like, you're not going to go back. But there are advantages to going forward with all that depth if you allow yourself to heal.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's what took me a long time.
And there's that big if.
Yeah. And when I say took me a long time, I mean, we're all at some stage of healing, right? Like, I'm still healing over a lot of that. I don't consider myself like fully healed, and I'm not sure anyone who's been through real trauma does. I think they see themselves as now what we call having experienced post-traumatic growth. And like, do I wish those things still never happened in the world? Yeah, I do. Absolutely. Is there still a part of me that wishes I could like somehow retain that innocence I had and live forever in a permanent state of bliss? Yeah, but then what would that also mean about the decisions and the effects that I've chosen to have on so many lives since then because of how bad it hurt? I don't think I would have become a person who cared that much about other people without it. I really don't.
Yeah.
I think I would have stayed somewhat happy but self-centered. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because you now have a very real way of relating to another person's pain.
Oh, absolutely. And this is important, especially regarding someone's healing path. Pain is, we love to quantify things here. Our favorite thing to do from the time we're little kids is we're taught to count. Think about it. The very first thing you learn to do.
Yeah.
Count.
Yeah.
It's all about quantification. And until you realize pain is not quantitative, it's qualitative. Pain is a qualitative event. It doesn't matter whether you were a young baby and were born for 90 seconds and experienced excruciating pain and then died, or if you're a 99-year-old woman who's lived her whole life with chronic illness and pain. Both of those living beings know what pain is. And from that moment on, say in an eternal relationship, they can relate to suffering. And that's a very qualitative experience. And in the eternal scheme of things, even though we love to quantify pain here, we love it. We constantly, you'll find this, especially at groups. One of the things I like to do is correct groups when they start to quantify, because they'll be like, oh man, the one-upping, like, here's my story. Oh man, here's my story. And while it's really good that they're sharing their stories, if you really listen between the lines, they're also sort of comparing their grief to one another's or quantifying their pain. And that is not helpful.
Yeah.
Let's just say it's really not, because pain at its best, the purpose of pain, in my opinion, the very purpose of pain is to give us that qualitative experience so that we can choose either at that point to become a more hardened person or to give in to softness. And when you allow pain to humble you and soften you, it becomes a part of the healing that then makes you a more resilient person. It's kind of like, it's strange to use this analogy, but there are two things in the Marine Corps that I really hated doing. The first was, every time you go out, you have to go back to the gas chamber. And the gas chamber is where you train with gas masks, and they put CS gas into a room that won't kill you, okay? They use gas that's not designed to kill their Marines, but it's terrible to breathe in. I mean, like, everything in your face swells up, everything in your mouth. If you get that in your throat, it feels like swallowing glass. I mean, it is terrible.
Oh,
it's a painful experience. And so you learn quickly how to be very effective and efficient at putting your gas mask.
And
that's the reason they do it.
Yeah.
Because now
because there's a consequence if you don't do it right.
And if you're out there and they're now using gas that will kill you, you need to be that efficient. So they make it excruciatingly painful
to mess up.
Correct. And I hated doing that every time I would deploy. The other thing I hated doing was getting my anthrax shot. Anthrax is a deadly poison that will kill you, and that was a favorite of terrorists out in the desert to use against Marines. And they would make you get this shot, and it hurt worse than that. Like, unlike a normal vaccine, it really creates a blister, and a pussy one, and a big puffed up, like, for weeks you're avoiding it, and it hurts and it's gross because it takes that much time to heal over. And you had to get it like 3 times because it's not a one-time thing. And then every time you deploy, they'd give you a booster. And I hated getting my anthrax shots.
Wow.
And it makes you feel lousy, for those who experience like feeling bad after a COVID shot or something, because, that can kind of bring that on. It's like worse. Yeah. It's like it feels so lethargic. And so it's just terrible. It makes you feel lousy, but it also gives you this huge blister. And if you think about it, like, in retrospect, am I really glad, because I did use a gas mask in 2 different situations that probably saved my life. And I also, I'm sure at some point, given the carnage and the death and the damage and things that we experienced, like, probably was exposed in some way, shape, or form to anthrax. I don't know. That's not a direct correlation. But I did know that if I was, I wouldn't die from it, right? I really believe the purpose of pain is that. Like, we're experiencing eternal vaccinations here, which are relatively small doses of pain that can only last the duration of a human life, so that in eternity, we don't make decisions when it's on an eternal scale that will completely alter our eternal life.
Wow.
It's a vaccination process. It's a training, if you will, in donning your gas mask correctly, so that when you go back to your real life, your true life, which this one is not. Now, I say that because everything you learn here is real and true, and you do take that, I believe, in some way, shape, or form with you. It's not to say that you don't experience real things here. It's to say that they're not lasting in the way that everything is outside of this realm. And so it's a training environment. And if you learn to start appreciate at least that there is meaning behind pain, it makes going through the gas chambers and the anthrax shots at least have some purpose. Now, years later, when I knew that was also traumatizing to me, my wife and I decided to do this international internship to Romania. But we had a daughter, and she was 18 months old, and the school had said, we never had anyone like take their child out there, and we're not sure that's the best idea. And we said, oh, well, we both really want to go. We were both family life majors, and we'd love to do it together. If there's any way to take her, we'd love to. And said, well, she's going to need all these shots. And so they gave us this huge list of the shots she'd need. And I remember taking her to that clinic the first time and getting her 3 or 4 shots in the same day. And I remember how bad she was screaming and hated it after the first one. And I'm like, you got like 3 more to go. And I was just like, what am I going to do? And it was the only thing that I could do. Think about it. As a loving father, was to make sure she had those vaccines. Because if I hadn't, that would have been fully irresponsible of me. And quite frankly, neglectful or at least unloving. To say, well, just come on out, and if you get hepatitis, who cares? That's not what a loving father would do. A loving father would make sure that she gets her shots. A loving father also doesn't just stand there and stare at their child while they're going through it. It was everything I could do, the only thing I could do, to say, you need these shots, but I'm going to hold you on my lap and comfort you the best I can the entire time through it. And it really will go by fast. When you're all done, you'll realize that wasn't that much pain. But in the moment, you would have thought I was killing her, right?
Sure.
And somehow in me, like, I had that realization in that moment, holding her on my lap, that like maybe all the anger and bitterness and resentfulness that I had gained for myself and the Marines and everything else during that period of time, our country even, had a purpose to it. And that maybe he was like I was in that moment, like allowing me to get those injections of life experience and anthrax and everything else for a reason. And that maybe it had a purpose way into my future, not only stuff myself, because it was triggering.
Sure.
It didn't just bring back the fact that I got vaccinated. It brought back all the memories, holding her like that.
Yeah. And
that was my senior year of marriage and family human development at BYU, but I still had to apply and decide to go in to do the Masters of Chaplaincy. And then I knew that was what would it entail, and I'd be having to go to therapy the whole time, because I was going back in the military, and that was the thing I was the most afraid of in life. There's no question. Like that was the monster staring me down that I knew I had to confront and go back and heal from. But if I didn't and I chose to run from it, I would just have delayed that healing the rest of my life.
Wow.
And so I decided, with my wife's support and help, and she has been the most amazing person, to go back in and face it and do it and change and become a chaplain. But I'm telling you that the relationships that built in my life, and the depth now of relationship I have with my kids and my wife, and the people I've worked with and the people I've helped, have been the healing for me, and gave me back my love of my country, gave me back my love of people, frankly, gave me back my belief in morality, and a lot of things that I lost, that I felt like I'd lost. So for what it's worth, healing is like I said, only happens in relationships. It's brought me closer to I can tell you, I consider myself, this may sound however it sounds, I hope I don't offend anyone, but like, I know I've worked closely in close relationship with God. And I know that he has been my partner in many occasions in people's lives, because it wasn't me. The healing that came to them certainly didn't come out of my mind, but it came, and it came fully and freely into them. And I know that healing is divine. So I consider him a partner, maybe not a close friend. I don't know, because we're not buddies, and I still, oh my gosh, does it have to be this bad to hear sometimes? How come things have to happen that are so terrible? So terrible, right?
Yeah. Really
And I
sorry.
still get flinches of that. Like I say, I'm still on my pathway of healing. I still get flinches of that anger of like, what is this? What is going on? Why can't we just make a better society, And why doesn't God help more with that? But my healing journey has taught me that there is amazing purpose in pain. There's amazing meaning behind why we suffer. And that it will probably be the greatest thing we hold up at the end of our lives on the other side, to say, like he did, I choose to keep these scars. I choose to keep them, because that was the single greatest thing I ever did. And it has made me the person I am today. So those, all through that program, which was a 2-year program, 2 years year round, summer and everything.
That was your master's?
And then continued on into, gosh, I think my wife and I still gone to talk to people who we were in therapy with even 5 years ago. So not as frequently. Definitely those 2 years were the most of the work, because as soon as I got back into the military and had to start working and, traveling and going to different places, it was trickier. But
what kind of symptoms did PTSD mean for you that you carried?
Definitely for me, it manifested in avoidance and anger.
Avoidance of
anything hard, like it.
Hard conversations.
Yes, you got it.
Hard emotions.
Yep. People, groups, like being around groups of people. I know it's weird, but you relate it all to years of being out there and thinking that it's best to just avoid them, because if I avoid groups of Marines, I wouldn't have to live the duplicity that I told you about. And if I avoided, and Marines are trained, don't go into large groups of people, right? Like when you're out there, you don't want to find yourself in a big group, because that's dangerous. And so that's one thing I think both of those sides of my personality at that time firmly believed, was that groups are dangerous. Like, if I don't want to be immoral, don't hang around groups of Marines. And if I don't want to be killed, don't hang around groups of Iraqis. So for me, it was like social things became very hard.
And risky.
Absolutely. Socialization.
Not only physically risky, but emotionally.
That's right. And so, man, my wife, poor wife, who's this beautifully happy, balanced person who loves socializing and loves family events and things, but I wouldn't with her. Like, I would even say I would. And then the time would come and it was time to go. And I was like, I'm not going. And it just ripped her apart,
You'd bail.
Yeah.
Too scary.
All the time. Because it was just so painful and scary. Like, why am I going to go there? What good could possibly come of me going there? And then if she would fight me at all on it, or say, you're going no matter what, then it was just, now I was angry. Now I was really mad. So,
How did you tap back in to your identity after that conditioning that you had?
Like I said, to me, it came down to relationships. I had one really good buddy who was there with me during that time, who you could say him and I was closest to him spiritually. He was a Lutheran from Minnesota, and was a guy who I could recognize was also having this duplicitous moral injury going on, because he came from a great family and a good upbringing, and he's good head on his shoulders, and he's a straight shooter. But he and I would kind of spend time away from the group. And I found that relationship and having relationships like it was the only thing that got me through it. And without people like him, I don't think I would have.
Because you were like-minded.
Yeah, because it was somewhat of a sanctuary in the middle of
You could
chaos.
Connect with how hard that was to
That's it.
go through.
And he and I both said, yeah, isn't that crazy? Like, out here, it's so different, and back home. And like, do you ever feel like this? Yes. Or, that just having anyone who's been through something benefits from going to a group, because groups talk about, well, hey, we've all been through this and we understand, right? And my only reticence to groups at all is just, and I don't have any, I think they're very healthy. I shouldn't say reticent, but like, only if they start comparing, like I said before, only if they start quantifying pain in groups does it ever get toxic. For example, if you're going to a group that's run by someone who's really trained in it, they're not going to allow that toxicity to subsist very long in the group, so you're good. But if you go to lunch with your sisters or your brothers and they have no idea what they're doing and all they do is quantify pain for 3 hours, you're going to go home even more damaged probably and angry.
Well, can you give an example of what it sounds like to quantify pain?
Yeah. Because veterans do this all the time.
Yeah. And
I've been to so many veterans groups, I can't even tell you. And they do it a lot. Here's my story. Okay. Wow. Yeah. I was there at this time. I remember that, So first it's relational, and that's the healing part. Like, you're not alone. We've all been there. But eventually it starts to become, what we call war stories or big fish stories, where people are constantly upping, like, how many people they saw get killed or how many operations they were a part of. That, well, you only did this job, but I did this job. And I can't tell you how many times, I could have told someone who say was a legal clerk, well, you were just a legal clerk. You weren't a security force Marine like I was. But then you could meet a SEAL who's like, well, you were just a security force Marine. You weren't a SEAL like I was. We were out there, you know what I mean? They can just, that can go on and on forever, where you're all like, you didn't experience the amount of pain that I experienced. Instead of, that's overlooking the entire purpose of pain, which is a qualitative experience that can't be quantified, but allows you to connect with people as you humble yourself in suffering and realizing maybe this is not the society we want to have. Maybe pain isn't something we want around forever, but in order to avoid it, we have to be loving and humble and kind. Like, you have to become someone who can willingly and easily and readily connect, because you don't want to propagate or perpetuate suffering.
So how do you avoid that?
Yeah, the quantification. Yeah, it's hard.
You stay in, I can empathize with you.
Yeah.
I want to tell you an experience of mine to do that, but I don't want to one-up you.
Think about it. I mean, it's so bad that our whole society does it. Sports, it's very unpopular to speak out against the dark side of sports because sports is so popular. And by the way, I believe that my son plays sports. Like, I believe sports can bring a lot of good things. But when we start to quantify, what we're really doing is competing.
Yeah. It's a comparison.
And we're taught to count, and then we're taught to kick the ball, like, especially boys. I'm telling you, it's very a competitive world. But as I've gotten to study more about human development, I realized, oh my gosh, like, girls have this probably in some degree more socially than even boys, because competition among, and now I've raised 2 daughters, it's like, wow, I had no idea that was all going on when I was just growing up trying to compete in sports, But man, like, women and men share this. Absolutely. They may share it in different forms or different facets of life, but competition is bred in very young. And all that competition really is another form of quantifying. That's all it is. It's like we're taught to, like, make the physical world and counting things, the amounts of time this has happened, or the amounts of time, or how much I felt this way, or how pretty someone is, or how strong someone is, or whatever. And it's also physical and quantified and measured. By the way, it always is, right? Wherever, if you ever wonder if something's quantified, just go to your work and see how many Excel sheets that are required to run the space. Like, that's quantification. And we're taught it from very young. The problem is that's not what we're here for at all. That's a total distraction from the qualitative experience of shared suffering. And everyone's down here suffering. Everyone. We're all really one in that way. And yet, because of quantification and distractions with those things, we've completely abandoned almost any even belief or realization that we're all just here getting qualified. Quality is simply an experience that a child can relate to. I remember having my first daughter and watching her sad that my wife was cut when she was, chopping potatoes.
Ah.
Well, she'd never cut herself. She'd never bled. She was probably, 2 or 3 years old. And I can tell you, she did not ever bleed yet, right? Like as far as getting cut with a knife. And so how does a 3-year-old know how to succor or feel the pain of a mother who just cut her hand if pain is only quantitative? Does that make sense?
Yeah. She had experienced
exactly
it in another
in
place.
another way. And it doesn't matter whether it's 3-year-old pain or whether it's, one of my favorite quotes, Mark Twain. My gosh, it makes me cry every time I think about it. To quote Mark Twain, you must be very careful with words.
Yes.
He said, pain is all relative. By the eternal laws of relativity, a child's loss of a doll and a king's loss of a crown are events of the same size. And he wrote that after he lost his daughter, by the way. Pain is a qualitative experience, and it's supposed to connect you with other people. But of course, our forces and energies that I fully believe in here on earth will tempt you to do the opposite.
Totally.
And avoid and isolate and withdraw and harden yourself. And this is where hypermasculine environments become super toxic, because the way that men internalize their pain is that they'll put it into some kind of like outward show of strength. And the way that women internalize their pain, is socially aggressive, and also they'll internalize it wherein cutting and dietary behavioral disorders start coming about as if a self-punishment or a self, if you will, sort of like, if I can just control this thing about me, then same, but it's the same thing. It's just a different form of it, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So we do that to ourselves when we are not processing pain correctly, and when we believe that instead of it having real, sincere, honest to goodness properties and purpose in our life, we think it's shameful.
Yeah.
That we shouldn't have experienced pain to begin with. And I'm here to tell you, the only reason we're down here, is pain. Look, if you're a religious person, and not a Latter-day Saint or otherwise, you believe that we are created by God and put down here on earth for some reason. And then if we pass this test, quote unquote, we inherit or go on to some other greater life. But that other greater life, if this test is passed, quote unquote, to some degree of, of like that we learned the right things, is passing the test, we can then inherit this beautiful existence somewhere else. Well, if you don't experience pain when you're dead because you inherited this beautiful existence forever and ever, and you couldn't experience pain before, either because you were in Heavenly Father's presence or because you hadn't been created yet, right? Which is the two different takes on Christianity. Either way, you couldn't experience pain except here. So when are you supposed to experience the opposite side of light? He created this really safe space in which to do it for us, that no matter how bad the pain got, it was only as temporary as this life, and then it's over. And if a day is 1,000 years to the Lord, and I've done this calculus as a chaplain, I nerd out on things like this. If a day is 1,000 years to the Lord, how long is an 88-year lifespan? About an hour and a half. It's like a feature film. It's like we're down here watching this movie.
Yeah.
And if we get the right points and then we pass a little test after, he's like, good job. You did it. Now you can love more. Now you can create better. Now you can connect for eternity. Because we all agree, right, that qualitative experience you just went down and saw in that movie, we don't want forever, right? Agreed. So now let's get to work making the good stuff.
Yeah, but you won't know the good stuff without
That's it.
the pain.
You got it. That's it. You couldn't. You can't. It's like it's like you're getting testing on a movie you've never seen, right? You can't. How do you know the plot? You didn't read the book, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What a great perspective.
Yeah.
On healing and on pain.
Yeah.
And suffering and meaning, right?
Do you know what's been the most painful lately? Because I did during those years in the Marine Corps, the political stuff that's been going on lately. Not because I particularly care one side or the other. I actually believe anything in an extreme is unhealthy. So like there's two unhealthy extremes, and we're supposed to stay somewhat balanced. But it's more because I remember the visceral in my own soul and the hatred for what I was doing out there in the name of my country. I think that gets me more worked up than anything.
The damage that it can do, that attitude.
And that people think that it's just okay to be that viscerally hateful towards somebody. And I'm like, man, you have no idea there are real consequences for elections and who gets in power and those kinds of things. And I think most people don't realize that there are, because here's what the election is to most people who've never gone to war. It's like, oh, okay, well, he's the president. I didn't like some of his policies. Maybe the price of gas went up or down, but I got my Netflix and I'm good to go. But like anyone who's done any government service or gone overseas or tried to help in some intensive, real way where our government's sending people into harm's way knows that is not true. Like there are real, actual, terrible consequences, both for the troops for elections and for those who suffer the consequences of what troops do.
It's you getting your eyes on what is actually paying the price.
So when people seem or come off a little bit ignorant to those real life third order effects of elections and things, I still get very like,
you get passionate.
I just wish you could know what I know.
Yes.
I just wish you could have seen what I've seen.
And experience.
And if you just take elections casually and don't vote or whatever, I'm just like, that is so wrong. You're a part of the pain that doesn't need to be as bad as it is in the world. But it is, because humans have agency and choice, and we make it bad.
Yeah.
We make it worse. It's like a child. It's like my daughter, if when she was getting those vaccines, would not have allowed me to hold her, instead just, run out of the room or tried to rip her arm away from the guy putting a shot in it. Like, you can make things worse. You have the choice to do that. But mostly, thankfully, people are pretty humbled by pain like she was, and they just want to be held,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
But if that's not your reaction, that's a warning sign.
Yes.
Like, you can make things worse. You can.
Yeah. Yes.
And I did for a while, I really did.
Wow.
So
very understandable though in that, but wow. The stories that you must hold in your mind and heart.
I rarely tell this either, but I remember one boy in particular in the detention center that I was, that I would see every day. And he was one of those boys I told you about. He was just so innocent, obviously. Like, he didn't belong there. And it was clear he missed his family. He was probably like 14. And I didn't speak a ton of Arabic, but you pick up a little, And that, like, his face to this day haunts me. When I started I'd been active duty with the military for a while, and then I started a full-time job. I was offered the position to be the chaplain for the state hospital. I had an experience with a patient, to say too much, but essentially that put them in the exact same frame of mind. And there was one point in which, when I was counseling with them, they would repeatedly say the exact same thing. They just kept saying, just let me die. I just want to die. And something about the way that triggered me and put me right back in that situation made me not only feel completely helpless again, like, what am I doing? I have no idea how to help anybody, even though I'd been through years of training already by then, but also like, this is insane. Like, this pain just keeps going around and there's no point to it, And I remember leaving that room that day, probably having one of the more spiritual, like, moments of my entire life, because I left his room and I went back to my office feeling completely like, why did I even do this job? Like, if I'm never going to get over my own stupid trauma anyway, because like, here I'm years out from it, and yet I'm still, he can send me back in just that fast, and make me feel all those terrible feelings again. And I don't even know what to say to him, never mind help him. And I just remember kneeling, because I didn't know what else to do. I was just like, God, what do I do? And why am I even doing this? Like, if I can be done, let me be done. Like, I never wanted to really do this in the first place, kind of like, but here I am, and this is my life. And if I can get out of it, let me out of it. And I will never forget just feeling the simplest prompting of my entire life, which I think people would say they feel a lot, but it can be meaningful. And it was just like, hey, you know how you're studying the scriptures? Yeah. Open right up to where you are. Like, just go, keep reading. And I'm like, not the answer or feeling I expected. I thought you'd give me some like dignified, noble answer. And he was just like, keep reading your scriptures, And I was like, okay, what else am I going to do? Right. And I was pretty depressed. So I just opened my scriptures up in my office, and I could not believe what I read, because I got a master's degree in religious education.
You knew the scriptures.
I knew the scripture pretty well, I thought, and it used in my whole career. And I opened up to Matthew 26. And in that chapter, when the Savior is going through Gethsemane, and we all know it, we all know the passage, I had never in my life read it the way I read it. And I told you he was my partner sometimes. That was when I realized it, because he said to me, like, you don't think I know? You don't think I know what he's going through. And if you read Matthew 26 very carefully, you'll realize that right after he correctly predicts that Peter will deny him before the cock crows, in fact, he'll deny him 3 times specifically. And right when he's done in Gethsemane, he's the one who wakes up his disciples and says, the soldiers are coming. It's time to go. So my whole life, when I read that he took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, some of his closest friends, and said, come watch and pray, or watch for me, stay awake, because I got to go do something. And I always interpret that as like, and I need you to watch out and make sure the soldiers don't come and mess this up or something. But I'm like, no, there's no way, because he already knew. Like, clearly he knew what would happen in the future, and he knew when the soldiers were coming. He woke them up. So why did he say to them, watch with me? Can you not watch 1 hour with me? And his very words in that chapter after he goes, it says, behold, my soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death, is what it says. Now, how would we translate that in modern vernacular in English? We would say, I am so sad, I want to die. Watch and pray. He wanted his best buddies with him. He just needed someone to be there, because frankly, I don't think it's a sin to doubt whether you can withstand the pain and suffering of this world. I don't think it's a sin to want to escape it. It's not. That kind of sadness is a human experience, and he went through it. And then when you read his words that we all know and quote all the time, Father, if it be thy will, let this cup pass from me. He was saying, let me die. Let me die. Nevertheless, thy will, not mine. Whereas he had to go it alone for some eternal purpose and atoning, power. We don't, and we shouldn't have to. When we take our friends with us and we tell them how sad we are, like the Savior did, they probably won't fall asleep. They probably will care and be there and understand what's going on. Whereas he had some greater purpose to fulfill, and so he had to do it alone. Like, we just don't have to. And he told me clearly as I read that passage, like clearer than I've ever had anything communicated to my mind. Like, I was as suicidal, if not more so, than these boys. I know exactly what they've been through. And if you don't think I've been with them the whole time, you're wrong. And I knew somehow that healing relationship had started where I could walk into a room and bring the presence of the Savior, not just my presence, and that his presence could heal. And that if they could emulate or cultivate or even just feel the hem of his garment, right? His presence, it would be healing. And it always was.
Yeah.
It just always has been. And it's not me, I can tell you that. But his presence heals.
Yes.
And he knows what pain is.
Yes.
And he has experienced that. So to whatever degree we suffer, qualitatively, he can succor us. Even if the very trial we're going through, it was not described in scriptures that the Savior went through it. It doesn't matter. He's been through it all. Frankly, I would still say, I bet my wife would still say sometimes I'm an ornery cuss. Because sometimes, like I said, with politics and things, when I hear people speak about him as if they're just a TV show or a football game, I'm just like, what are you talking about? Real people really die, and real people really suffer because of the consequences of election.
Yeah. Yes. Think as you've described, what we suffer gives us connection, what we see. I feel the same way. This is going to sound trivial, but I get the same passionate way when I see reality shows that mess with people's relationships.
That's it.
The Bachelorette, Love is Blind.
You're a true social scientist. You can't watch those without just grimacing.
And go,
what are we doing?
And because of
how is that legal?
My own experiences with divorce and it's like you are toying
with what you have no idea what you're doing.
With so many delicate, tender, and you're putting people in this room and wanting them to create a relationship in a couple of hours over appearance.
As if it's a real relationship. Anyway.
And it's like, stop it. Stop. I had to quit watching him. At first it was like, well, I'm a relationship person and this is so fascinating. And I finally had to say, I can't do it because I know what this does to people's lives.
And worse even still, that they would think to profit off of that.
Yeah.
That they're doing it to make money.
Yeah. It's a mockery. It's a mockery of the relationship on the planet, that we live for and strive for. And
the only and most holistic form of healing one can get. And you're going to make that divisive and create lifelong damage. I mean,
lifelong damage.
You're taking the most sacred way people can heal and get through this pain, which is a relationship, a marriage relationship. and you're just dragging it through the mud.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter. And that's how I feel
when you see the other things. Yeah.
You know the feeling.
I do.
Even though you've never been through what I've been through.
Yes.
You exactly relate to me.
I can.
And that's qualitative pain.
Yeah, there we go.
That's the quality of pain. We share a connection, a deep understanding, even an affection, if you will, even though we're almost total strangers who've had one conversation before this. And it's because qualitatively, we have experienced very similar.
Yeah.
And books.
And books. Spencer, you are amazing.
No, I just want to say what you do. Truly, I mean, I'm doing what I can do now to help community and help people come together and heal in the way that I felt I should. But this is what you do. You're still in the front line. You're still in the trenches.
Well, I am just so grateful that you consented and so grateful for your service as a soldier.
Thank you.
I mean,
I've learned to say thank you for that. It used to trigger me too.
Yes.
But now, honestly, I can say, yeah. I know that means something to most people.
Yeah. My father was also a soldier in World War II.
Wow.
And
see, if I'm quantifying right now, I'm saying, well, he did a lot more than I did. But qualitatively, we are brothers, him and I.
That's right. And I say we because I can't separate my dad from my family.
Yeah.
I have to say we so appreciated the patriotism that he taught us and the value of the bravery of him being that soldier and stepping in and doing that. And so when I say that, I mean that from my heart, that thank you for your service.
When you say it that way, it means a lot. Thank you. And thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you. So let's sum up our episode with Spencer Cooper with 10 takeaway thought pockets. Number 1, isolation does not support healing. Rest can happen alone. Numbing can happen alone. Avoidance can happen alone. But healing, true healing, happens in relationships. Spencer's story reminds us that even the deepest trauma began to shift, not through isolation, but through connection. A comrade who understood, a wife who stayed and supported, a therapist who holds space, a God who did not abandon him. We often hear people say, I just need to go heal on my own. And sometimes a pause or a break is necessary. The very wounds that were created in a relational environment are healed in a relational environment. People who have been given very unique experiences to be so wounded can be the best suited to help others through similar wounds. So connection is not optional in healing. It's the mechanism of healing. Number 2, moral injury is trauma to the identity. What struck me so deeply was not just what Spencer experienced, but who he had to become to survive it. When you are trained to override your conscience, when you are asked to harden against empathy, when you must split yourself in two in order to function, that's not just stress. That's an injury to the identity. We are deeply grateful for the men and women who serve and protect our country. Their willingness to step into danger, to endure training that reshapes instinct and emotion, is something most of us will never, ever fully comprehend. And at the same time, we recognize that coming home often requires a different kind of courage, the courage to soften what had to harden, to reconnect where they had to detach, and to rediscover the parts of their identity that may have been in service of duty. We honor not only their sacrifice in protecting us, but also the quiet, ongoing work of rebuilding relationships and reclaiming wholeness afterward. The deepest trauma is often not what happened to you, but what you had to betray inside yourself to endure it. Without identity and authenticity, you will eventually become sick. Your innards just cannot stand that dissonance forever. And so for many of us, that's where the healing must begin, with reclaiming our authenticity. Number 3, grief in armor. Avoidance and anger are often grief in armor. PTSD in its many forms doesn't always look like visual flashbacks. Sometimes it looks like bailing on social events, avoiding hard conversations, simple irritability, rage at systems at work or other organizations, becoming easily startled or reactive, or emotional shutdown. If gone unchecked, the armor that saved you in conflict may then suffocate you in relationships. Number 4, we can relate through the quality of pain, not the quantity. Pain is not a competition. One of the most profound truths shared today is that pain is qualitative, not quantitative. We are conditioned to compare who had it worse, who suffered more, who earned the right to grieve. But pain does not operate on a ranking system. As Spencer shared, Mark Twain wrote, "A child's loss of a doll and a king's loss of a crown are events of the same size." We can relate and connect to the loss itself, different circumstances, but loss and pain nonetheless. Pain's purpose is not to measure. Pain is a shared human experience meant to connect us, not rank us. The moment we start comparing pain, we disconnect from its purpose and the opportunity to connect and enhance a relationship. Number 5, what will the pain do to us? While in pain, we have a choice to allow it to harden or to soften you. Hardening feels powerful, it feels controlled, it feels safe and protective, but it can also isolate. Softening can feel terrifying, exposed and vulnerable, but it connects. And connection is where resilience grows. Spencer did not become healed by pretending the pain wasn't there. He became healed by allowing it to humble him, by allowing it to deepen his empathy, his compassion, and his understanding of others' suffering. Pain we allow to humble us becomes wisdom. Growth is not coming back, it's becoming something new. We often say, "I just want to get back to who I was before." But trauma changes you. Experiences change you. Exposure changes you. Healing is not returning to innocence or ignorance. It's enlightenment, knowledge, and perseverance. It is integrating experiences into your life that create depth, knowledge, and wisdom. A caterpillar doesn't become a better caterpillar. It becomes something entirely different. With wings, it can fly. And maybe that's the invitation to suffering, not going back, but real change and real growth. Growth that leads us to a personal metamorphosis. Number 7, the courage to do it differently. A courageous piece of Spencer's story is the choice to go back to the very environment that wounded him. But this time he had self-awareness and a different role. During Spencer's service in the military, he experienced firsthand the moral dissonance that so many service members face. The internal conflict between the person they believed themselves to be and the behaviors demanded by duty. Because he lived it, he found the courage to re-enter the military, a place he never thought he would return, but this time with a new purpose: to help his fellow soldiers navigate the psychological and emotional work required to heal, to reclaim their sense of self and restore healthy relationships, both with people they love and with the country they serve. His mission is to guide others through the very challenges he endured through personal struggle into a pathway for collective healing. Pain in experience shows us when the pain is possible. The experiences of one can connect us to others. Some learn better through experiences. The metaphor of the vaccines and the gas masks reframed suffering in a way that is both tender and powerful. Spencer knew from experience what was coming if he was not prepared. If his gas mask was not properly worn, he was trained to know what it felt like to drive home the importance of his preparation. Pain is not always punishment. It can be about preparation for future events. Not all suffering is an act of God. Much of it is a result of people's neglect, choices, and human agency. But suffering can still be used to refine and to transform. The very experiences that once filled Spencer with anger gave him the capacity to sit with others in the darkest moments. That is therapeutic work. Number 9, the influence of a higher power. There is a common thread woven through this conversation and many of our other Hungry for Healing episodes. It is that suffering can make us more compassionate and loving towards other people. Pain is meant to make us more connected, not more divided. It can make us more humble, not more hateful. When we choose to turn our suffering against each other, we multiply it. But when we choose to use our suffering to help and to understand each other, it softens it and we redeem it. And maybe that is the ultimate healing takeaway. Your pain is evidence. It may be evidence that you are becoming capable of a different love. From my perspective, and in line with what many in mental health understand, higher powers can be a real source of strength. For me, as a believer of Jesus Christ, that means knowing that Christ has felt every sorrow, every doubt, and every struggle we face. He truly understands what it's like to be hurt, to be afflicted, to be misunderstood and overwhelmed. That knowledge that someone with arms outstretched knows exactly what we feel reminds us that if or when someone may fail us, we are never alone. We are never truly isolated and always seen. Number 10, unexpected healing moments. Healing doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive in a crisis. It doesn't always show up in a diagnosis or in a breakdown or even at your lowest moment. Sometimes it comes up very casually. One touching quote of Spencer's in this episode was, "As you're exchanging energy with living, beautiful, nutrient-rich beings, then you receive what you need to heal." My meeting Spencer was an example of this because in that moment, we felt connected through our interests through the same books. We share a mission to help others. I felt his spirit and his sincerity, his vibe. And there's something profoundly hopeful about that. It reminds us that healing is not reserved for therapy rooms and hospital beds. Sometimes it lives in ordinary spaces. It waits in connection. It whispers instead of shouts. You may believe you have all the control and the responsibility to make things happen, but we don't. We don't have to orchestrate our own healing perfectly. Maybe you just follow the nudge to go get soup. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Hungry for Healing. Remember, winning the race is not about finishing first, but is about rising each time you fall. So get up, get up, get up, and win the race.
The views and opinions expressed on the Hungry for Healing podcast by guests, hosts, or anyone appearing on the show are solely their own and do not represent the views of the Edify Group, its owners, employees, affiliates, or any other individual or organization. All content provided on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional mental health treatment, therapy, medical advice, diagnosis, or care. If you are in need of support, please seek the services of a qualified mental health or medical professional. The podcast and its creators make no guarantees regarding the accuracy, completeness, or applicability of any information shared and assume no liability for any actions taken based on the content of this program.